My name is Darin. I'm a consultant with Source Allies. And this is a talk on intro to CI/CD and specifically talking about AWS developer tools. If I can get on the right screen, make sure this is working. Yep. Quick outline of what I'm going to talk about. Quick introduction about me, talk about CI/CD some, and then go into a little bit more depth on the AWS developer tools that are available in this space. So I got my start more on the ops side of the house. Got a help desk job in college supporting students, transitioned to supporting teachers and staff members, and started to learn about servers and images. And this idea of putting a system into a known state was kind of a cool, interesting thing we were doing. Once every summer, you do a massive project where you re-image all the machines. It's the kind of thing we were doing back then. Then I transitioned into the world of managed IT services, so small businesses outsourcing their IT departments to a company like the company I was working for at the time, getting a deep dive into world of Windows, small Windows networks, Active Directory, terminal servers, usually one key line of business app, and learning a lot more about that. It was a deep dive into learning a ton of things about operations, but also overworked and stressed out, and all those things about the on-call stress from the keynote this morning really resonated with me. A company that was doing those traditional ops and having a lot of that kind of culture debt type of thing that was going on. Around this time, I started learning about DevOps and Agile and Lean all at the same time, so my definition of those kind of blend in together. And the cloud was in all the business magazines at the time, and business people were our clients, so we were moving people to the cloud, picking up their local networks, moving it into the cloud. I think there's a talk on a change like that later today that I'm looking forward to. And something was bugging me about the way we were doing it, because we were taking what was a server in a closet that somebody sat at and typed in and installed Windows to now a virtual server in a data center that somebody loads an ISO on and logs into and installs Windows. And it seemed different, it seemed better, but it was still a lot of the same thing and not really learning any of these lessons that we've been trying to learn here, the lessons that I'm seeing people learning through DevOps. So I read the Phoenix Project, I read the goal, talked to people about that book, tried to avoid the fact that they read it before I was born. That was always an awkward conversation. But those core ideas really resonated with me of how do you improve and how do you solve what the bottleneck is. So I transitioned out of operations and out of sysadmin work into software development, and now, therefore, I am a DevOps rock star. Awesome. Sort of, maybe not yet. Someday, if that's a thing, I was asked if we could get pyrotechnics or a fog machine, and they said no. So I'm skipping that today. So how do you do that? There's a lot of ways people describe DevOps. My definition, as I was learning all these things at the same time, it gets kind of fuzzy and blends in with Lean and Agile and Kaizen and all these other words that recruiters really like to see on LinkedIn profile. And when it first came onto the scene, DevOps was an answer to a solution to a problem, that problem of the wall between dev and ops. But it was also a reminder of the way we need to look at those problems, and that wall was a bottleneck that our system of delivering products and features and solutions was having at the time. And it was that wall between dev and ops. It was also the wall between the idea that you had and the impact and the implementation of that idea. And so when you take a step back to the organizational level, there's two questions you're always asking. What do I need to do? And how do I do it more efficiently? I think that's what I go back to all the time is, what do I need to do and how do I do it more efficiently? Which ties really nicely in with two of the core concepts of DevOps, and that's monitoring and automation. I'm going to talk more about automation today, but these are the mechanisms by which we answer those two questions of what do I need to do and how do I do it efficiently. Monitoring is great because if you look around the room, everybody in here knows how to do awesome things. There's a developer in this room probably who could make an animated roller coaster using pure CSS. And if you do, find me at lunch because I have an idea. But if you don't do the right thing at the right time, you're going to be wasting time. And so monitoring helps you answer that question. And then someday your monitoring is going to say, hey, whenever a customer uses a coupon code, their session gets destroyed and they get logged out. And you get frantic phone calls and Slack is exploding, and you quickly code that awesome solution that you're great at doing, and then you call the boss and you say, don't worry, problem's fixed. It will be in QA tomorrow. Should be live by the end of the week, except Brett's on vacation, so it's going to be Monday, and then all the problems will be solved. That doesn't work. So you need to have this automation, and that's where CI/CD comes in. Continuous integration, continuous delivery. Continuous integration is getting your code written, compiled, tested, reviewed, merged into your code base with a bunch of other developers doing the same thing to the same code base and having not everything blow up or fight with merge conflicts all day or spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday developing, Thursday, Friday agreeing on whose code gets to go in. These ideas of CD or CI go into that. CD, continuous delivery, is that next step of merging the code, building it, getting it out into production, and integrate it into your live running application where you're not cutting a CD and shrink wrapping it and mailing it. It's continuously being integrated into the system that everybody is using. Still getting from that idea of how do you quickly get from the idea, the thing you want to do, to the impact and seeing its effect. So how do we do that? These are the concepts. There's a whole lot of tools, more than one slide, way more tools. There's more than one way to skin a cat or deploy a cat GIF to the internet. You can use multiple different things for your source control, for building, for testing things, for deploying things. And so for the rest of what I want to talk about today, I want to look at the specific set of tools that AWS offers in that space. Amazon Web Services has been adding about one new service a day, so it's hard to keep up. And most of these came out in the past year or two. For that reason, some of them haven't had a chance to stand up against some of the things that are already out there. And a lot of organizations are already going to be pretty invested in the solution that they've got. And so you can't just quickly say, okay, we've been doing Jenkins forever, and now we're going to do code pipeline. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But on smaller projects and finding ways to experiment with these tools, they do show a lot of promise. What's not up here is Cloud9, another thing that I think goes into this category. I haven't had a chance to play with that yet. It's an IDE that is backed by EC2, run your development environment in the cloud. It seems to be down this idea of Amazon workspaces where you get away from needing a high-powered laptop in front of every developer to just needing an internet connection. What was mentioned in the keynote this morning of like, if you have an internet connection, you can do anything. And so building into that idea of all these tools are out there, how do we put them together? The two, let's see, what service do I have at the beginning here? CodeStar is another one I'm going to quickly gloss over because CodeStar is another new one. AWS services just kind of build on top of each other. You've got EC2 and S3 sitting down there at the bottom with tons of things built on top of it. AWS CodeStar is a tool that is allowing people to deploy kind of a pre-existing concept, template, develop and build an app to AWS. I think an example would be WordPress, but there's plenty of other templates that I didn't write down the names of. But it sets up the whole CI/CD tool chain for you. I think it's going to be a great thing for a quick personal project, for something like a hack that you want to do and throw together a proof of concept real quick. Or if you want to just look at something that's similar to what you're doing, deploy it with this one click, and then look at what they built. Because you don't pay to have a WordPress on Amazon. You pay for the resources that template stands up. And so by taking a look at that, you can learn a little bit about how you might be able to improve your application or see how the AWS way of doing things is. Then you can look at that way and change it to suit your own needs. The next thing here is AWS Code Commit. The last talk in here was on very GitHub related, I believe. Code Commit is Amazon's secure, scalable, private Git repository service. It is encrypted at rest and in transit, and it's secured through identity and access management. So if the way you're using Amazon is already cool with the security considerations you have at your organization, this could be a solution that helps fit into that if you're having trouble moving off of some already approved repository or version control system. It's Git, so it works with all of your Git tools, and you've got unlimited repositories with pay-as-you-go on a user basis. Your storage capacity increases as your users go up, and so it's not on a per repository basis or anything like that. So as you're deploying a microservice infrastructure, it would make sense to split your repositories, whereas if you feel like you're limited to, you got 10 repositories, you might accidentally build lots of monoliths that way. So to do a quick demo of what code commit looks like, it's pretty straightforward. Let me switch my screen to mirroring. Did it work? It worked. So I'm logged into AWS console right now, into AWS code commit. This and all the other developer tool services show up here in the developer tools section. Code commit, of course I'm logged out. I don't know. I'm gonna hide my screen for a second. I was logged in right before the talk. Let's see. Ooh, first time. That's a miracle. Cool. So this can all be stood up via CloudFormation or other tools or the command line to make your repository. So you don't have to go in here and use the console, but for the sake of trying things the first time and understanding what features are available, I recommend playing with that first, but strongly advise deploying that infrastructure as code as soon as you're able to. So if I want to make a new repository, we'll make that, give it a name, and create. And that was easy. It asks if I want to set up any SNS notification topics. If you need to integrate with other systems, those features are there. I'll skip that for now, and then I've got it. This is very similar to the page you're going to see on GitHub when you first create a new repository, giving you information on how to actually set that up locally. You can do HTTPS or SSH. Like I said, it's encrypted in transit there. I'm going to pick that I'm on Mac OS X. I've got Git installed. I'm good there. SSH key pair is going to be necessary if you're using SSH, so you'll have to generate a key and upload it to your IAM user. That is something that I have already done, but the docs on that are relatively straightforward, and then you just tell Git that you want to use that key file for AWS code commit, and then it's as easy as cloning your repository. I've got a repository here that is already set up. It's Git initted already. I got a few commits on there, but I want to add that remote. So let's do that. Git remote, add code, commit, that. And then I can push that up there. Oops. Internet is good, and the repository is small, so I am pretty good there. My empty repository now has a little bit of code thrown into it. Something that code commit is, it's new, it's improving. I just learned about a couple features of the UI last night that I had totally not noticed yet. It's not up to the level that I would see on GitHub. GitHub is great, I love using it. So that's where I'm sticking for now, but it does have these features that GitHub has as well. Look at branches, look at diffs. So depending on your processes, it could definitely work for that. Something that's missing at the moment is webhooks. There's always a yet next to that. When I see code commit doesn't have webhooks, it always says yet. So eventually, I assume we will have that, but for now, I am going to do the rest of this here with this same repository, but I also have it set up here on GitHub. So I'm going to pull that up here. Same repository, so GitHub obviously looks differently than code commit. And so I'll be taking a look at this here in a minute. So let me flip this back. Oop. You were seeing what I was doing, right? Okay. Hey, back to that. So that is code commit. Like I said, The UI is not as cool as GitHub. It doesn't have webhooks. I love reviewing pull requests on GitHub with its commenting features. Code commit has some of that, but not all of it. I expect a lot of that is on the way, but the AWS infrastructure is the way those features evolve is they start at that API and simple level, and then as they evolve over time, more things become available. So S3 got a facelift recently, but S3's been around forever. So I don't know if we're going to see code commit hit this level, but is definitely a useful tool and integrates really well with the other AWS services. The next thing in the developer tools suite is code build. Code build is scalable building and testing. You pay for what you use when you use it. And the build steps are all based around running things in Docker, which is super convenient if you're already doing that. And if you're not already doing that, I would recommend it. Taking away the challenge of dealing with keeping your build agents up to date with the right versions or running on the right build agent. At this point, I need something that can run Docker, and I know how to do all my build steps in that. Even if I'm not deploying in Docker, if I need to do an npm install, I don't necessarily have to install everything at once. Or if I want to run tests, I can pull my code in, pull npm, run tests. We'll see that in a second here. You can use it on its own. It can be made part of code pipeline. You can tie it to various source definitions, GitHub, code commit, a variety of other things. And it's configured in code based on this build spec YAML file. This will live in your repository, tell you how to build that project. So if I want to take a look at this project that I have here, I have added to it let's get the right project, a build spec YAML file. At the moment, I just have 2 phases added to this file, an install phase and a pre-build phase. This is just a little Express app, and all I'm going to use code build for right now is installing dependencies and running the tests on it, because I want to figure out how to get my continuous integration improved here. I don't want to have to check out code and run tests manually. I'd like code to be tested when I push it, or when I put up a PR, I'd like for it to tell me whether it is going to work or not. So to install the dependencies, I'm taking a look at my project structure here on the left. Let's go into the app folder. And then let's just run an npm install. And then to run those tests, npm test. This is just a little Express app, a little web server, and I've got a couple tests here. If you were just in the testing talk, these are not good tests. These are tests that say it responds to 200 if you go to the root, and it responds to 404 if you go to foo bar. But that's enough for right now. So let me save that. I've got that on that branch. Let's not just push to master. Let's do things the right way here. Okay, so just committed, push my branch to GitHub. So let's go take a look back at that. Hey, I just pushed that. Let's make a pull request here. Looks pretty good. I will get that pull request up there. What I don't have here is any sort of integration yet. Or yes, I do. It just took me a second. So I've already added this code build project. I previously deployed it. It's a cooking show trick. You already have the baked turkey already in the oven. And so code build is already checking on this, and it's going to tell me whether or not that works. But while that's running, let me look at how I actually set that up. So over here in code build, I've got this secret one sitting here that I already had. But I want to create a new project. If you don't have any automated testing running when you push something to GitHub, this is a really easy thing to add. It takes about less than 10 minutes to do it. So let's add a new project here. The source, I can choose a variety of things. That source column I was showing earlier for tools, this is everything that code build supports, S3, code commit, Bitbucket, GitHub. I'm going to choose GitHub. That happens to be a public repository. Let's see if I can remember what that's called. Yep, I got it right. This box here, let's make that work. user repository in my account because I'm already set up here. There we go. I want to enable the webhook. That's going to add the webhook in GitHub for me just for free, and I'll enable the build badge. That's a cool thing you can get in your README. And the next comes into the steps of how you actually want to build it. So the build spec was saying what to do. You do have to configure what to build it on. Everything I'm doing here could be defined in CloudFormation or Terraform or something else that's going to stand up this build environment. Going to run it on Ubuntu. That's the only option. I can pick a variety of ways to run those tests. Since this is a little Node app, I'll run it in Node.js. I'll run it on the latest. And beyond that, I just need to tell it to use my build spec YAML file that's in the source code. That's what my file is named. I can name it whatever I want. Not worrying about certificates right now. For this project, I have no artifacts. Don't need to worry about cache. I'm going to let it create a role for me in this case. Again, if you're deploying this through CloudFormation, you may be creating these roles yourself. And I don't need access to any other resources in a VPC. In the advanced settings, it lets you look at things like what type of resource is this going to be running on. I don't need a lot of memory, so I'm not going to pay for 15 gigs to do 2 Mocha tests on there. So I don't need any environment variables. Tagging is also always a good thing. So let's just make sure that I know that that's mine. Gonna hit continue, and that should go ahead and create that project for me. Unless I missed something. Hey, I missed something. So you do have to put the artifacts, even if I don't necessarily have any, but these are going to be going into S3. And I will put it in a bucket that I created here. An artifact bucket, again, another thing. You're standing up this whole infrastructure, you have to make an artifact bucket. That's why doing this in the console is a little nicer. You get to see all these things that you need, because if you dive straight into that CloudFormation template, you will be drowning in lines of code. So it's nice to try this first to get your head wrapped around a few things. So I'm clearly still missing something. Oh, probably already made that roll. Hey, I did it. Going to review and save that. Okay, so it's going to yell at me for the duplicate. Last time I ran through this, I had not created the project already. So let's look at the one that I've got. It's identical to what I was just configuring here. Lets me see a look at the history of this project, the different builds that have happened, how long the builds took. And when I hop back over to GitHub, I have a check that failed. So I can click details here. That's going to open up co-build for me. I'm already logged in, so that's going to make things convenient. And it failed here on the pre-build step. And I can take a look down here and see what happened. So test was response to the root. Expected body hello world does not match DevOps Days Des Moines. So I clearly made a mistake there. So my test says I want to say hello DevOps Days Des Moines. I'm saying hello world, so let's fix that. Okay, so that's going to push as well. I will go back here to where I have that PR in GitHub. See this commit that I made earlier has a failed build on that. The new build is running, and that's going to tell me what is going on with that one, whether that's going to succeed or not. So over here in code build, you can see the process of those running. And this is going to run on branches as well as PRs. You can configure that to just target the master branch if you want, but having this up for a PR is super helpful so that you can know if that code is going to work. Let's see if it is done. Cool. Yes, I believe that's what's going on there. I didn't notice those two running before. I thought it just did one there. But I believe that's the case there, is that because I have it also in a PR. So if I hop back here, it's saying all checks have passed, and it puts a check mark on that commit. So you can see as you're working on things if something broke it. So if you've got a PR up and you need to respond to some comment, make a quick fix, you put it in there, and it was a quick fix. I was replying to a comment. I'm not going to run those tests again myself, and then they fail. You now know that. You don't have to rely on your own testing, your teammates' testing, or it breaking when you finally run tests as part of your deployment. So that's what code build can help you do. And one more thing that is handy is, now that I've got that passing, I've got the badge on my project that will say what's going on. That's master branch, obviously, so if I hop back in here and merge that, because it's green, so it's obviously safe to merge. Nothing bad will ever happen if you do that. That's going out there, and then eventually this will flip to passing, and now you can just see at a glance what's going on there. Cool. So that's code build. Like I said, it can be run standalone just like I did there. If you've got a project that doesn't have that feature already, I would say just do it. It takes half an hour to get that stood up, and then your testing is now better than it was. You can be a little bit more confident in your code as you're deploying that. And it immediately solves that it worked on my laptop problem. Because you can put up a PR that worked on your laptop, and then somebody else runs it, it doesn't work on theirs. You can immediately have this check of, well, it doesn't work in code build. So back to the developer that was working on it. Code deploy is another feature in the AWS Developer Tools kit that is for automating deployments to EC2 or Lambda or an on-prem server. You install an agent on there. Code deploy can talk to it. I've got a link up here to YouTube because this guy does a really great series of videos. His name is Flynn Bundy on this using code pipeline with code deploy. That's an area I don't have a ton of experience with for code deploy, and he goes into great depth on some of the things you can do, which is setting up like blue-green deployments to a cluster of servers. Being able to have code deploy manage, is this deploy actually working? Put it out there and then run tests and see what's going on. And then switching traffic between the two provides UI tools to let you see where traffic is going. Like the code build, its spec is defined in an app spec YAML, which could live in your project to define what does that build process look like. And then putting all of these things together is AWS Code Pipeline. You can use all these tools on their own, set up triggers for them, run them manually. Code Pipeline is the tool that you can use to put all of this together. You could run a code pipeline of code commit goes to code build, which does code deploy, or maybe triggers a CloudFormation stack to stand up. Or you can have a GitHub repository trigger a Jenkins build that eventually runs. I think the deploy level, you're kind of limited to AWS, because why would you be using code pipeline at that point? But you don't have to use just the AWS tools. They do integrate with all those other options, which goes back to the tools page I was showing before. All those tools up here are supported by the code pipeline process. And with the different hooks you can tap into, you can take kind of where you are now and figure out, does any of this help? So kind of going back to the original ideas of DevOps and the things that we want to try to accomplish in tightening that feedback loop is what this is all about. Continuous integration and continuous deployment are about speeding up that process and releasing less bugs in the process. We can't just speed it up, but getting a better cycle there with the goal of, I think like what was said before, of reducing our suffering. So automating these tools that you would have to have a big QA process, or you'd have to have a build process, or you'd have to stage your releases and get things scheduled in bigger batches because you just don't trust that your code's going to work. Getting these tools built in to automate these things defines it well and lets you put all this together. But I would encourage you to not feel like you have to go all the way in. I'm talking about AWS, but you don't have to drink the AWS Kool-Aid. You can find what features work best for you, what features you want to build off of. And if there's other products that are building great features, that's the great thing about this, is there's all these tools. So if you look at what your need is and what your problem is and what the bottleneck is in your organization, you can try to find the tool that is going to work best for that. So thank you. I've got a couple of links up here. A couple of takeaways I would say is, if you're not doing your builds in Docker, do them now. Containers can run anywhere, and your build can run anywhere. And if your build can run anywhere, then you don't get locked in to any sort of build process, be it code pipeline or anything else. I would also consider the cost of maintaining your CI/CD infrastructure. AWS Developer Tools is offloading a lot of that initial setup. But if you're at a scale where it makes sense to have your own team managing all this, then you can build something more custom to what you want. So it's a balance of where do you want to spend that money and where do you want that knowledge. And then focus on discovering your biggest problems and find the tool that solves that. And maybe I talked about one of those and maybe I didn't. Not the other way around. Don't see the tool and say, everybody is using this, so therefore I should be using it. Start with your problem and work out that way. The link there, first one is a link to a CI/CD workshop that is being given at AWS conferences, walks you through a lot of things, and it's being updated all the time. The second one is a blog on setting all this up across multiple AWS accounts, because if any of this was confusing, that is a nightmare of confusion dealing with cross-account privileges and setting up roles and access. So if you want to chat about that later, I would love to, but there's plenty more to learn there. So thank you very much.